Welcome back, everyone, to the Catalyst Pharmacy podcast. Today we had Lori Maraist on from Professional Arts Specialty Pharmacy down in South Louisiana, which is really cool. They've won a really unique pharmacy that obviously does started out 100%. I think the way I remember it back is 100% compounding in the beginning, but two, they're kind of a nationally recognized pharmacy and really I'll just say complex niche might be the word, but wound care specialists, working with patients and providers on really sometimes last resort wound care. So until something maybe potentially you're trying to ward off anything bad and prevent anything really drastic from happening, like an amputation or something. And then also she got into just some specialization around ENT as well. So really unique, and specialty is in that the specialty sense that I think most everybody kind of think about. And then also she kind of comes from a really cool leadership training background. She spent some time in some of the national chain space, learned from a lot of different folks, also ran training and leadership training at some of those companies before moving into an independently owned pharmacy that's really scaled out to a bunch of people. So that's obviously a true need in that regard. So great podcast. Jonathan joined us as well. Jonathan Duyon, he'll be a little bit of a regular host as well occasionally. So he's our director of sales, but he's also done almost every job at originally Pioneer, now Red Cell as well. He's a great addition to the team in that regard as far as a podcast rotation. So we'll take you there now. Okay, Lori. Well, hey, thank you for doing this. Thank you for jumping on with us. We're here. But Lori, if you can you tell us about your pharmacy journey, weaving in professional arts as well into the story a little bit? If you want to just kind of start there, how'd you get into pharmacy? What made you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have my great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather were both chemists in France. And so came to America. And so I grew up hearing all the old soda pop, pharmacy stories. And so I was pretty early high school that I was I want to be a pharmacist. It just so happened that my chemistry teacher was a pharmacist that hated it and got out of it, started teaching chemistry. But her husband was also a pharmacist. And he still ran his pharmacy. So I used to, hear from both of them, and she would be like, don't go into it. You're going to hate it. And he's like, oh, you're going to love it. So I always kind of, had the good and bad explanation about what pharmacy was going to be. And so my journey started really early. When I was in pharmacy school, I did hours at little independent pharmacies. And one of those pharmacies, was owned by the father of Erica Dreen, one of the owners of Professional Arts. So I met Eric and David, the two founders of Professional Arts Pharmacy, before they started the pharmacy. And over the years, my career really took a different path than independent pharmacy. But we always kept in touch. And I said, one of these days, we both felt like one of these days we're going to work together. We're going to find something, because we both really respected each other's kind of business sense. And so luckily it ended up happening. But I really, I went into pharmacy thinking I was going to own my own pharmacy, go that route, and did complete opposite, where I went big box retail, but ended up, I never thought of myself as I guess a leader. I wasn't, I was like, okay, I'm just going to start working in the pharmacy. No big deal. But over the years started, I really cared about everything and started doing more, and ended up getting promoted with Albertson Savon, was a divisional pharmacy manager of Louisiana, East Texas, Arkansas. Shifted over to CVS, but I had a really unique kind of right turn where I enjoyed operations and, oversaw, 20 pharmacies, but really started getting passionate about the HR side of things, mentoring, development, leadership development. And so, I also got to the part of my career where I just said yes to opportunities that came along, and was like, sure. I have no idea how to do that, but if somebody's willing to teach me, then sure, I'll try it. And so I was asked to go into CVS's corporate offices to do training over the years, ended up doing leadership development, change management, and really had got to learn from some fascinating people started to really appreciate kind of the neuroscience of leadership, of how the brain worked. And so I think the pharmacy side of my career, and then understanding how the brain worked and the hits of dopamine with, leadership,
sure.
like it was kind of this really cool place where I got to use kind of both of those, the science and the passion for leadership and development. But then whenever you're in a big company, you really have to narrow down on what you're focused on. And I missed the operation. Like I wanted to do a little bit of everything, and you can't do that in a big organization. So connected back with Eric and David and kind of the timing, they were on this major growth trajectory. That really it was the right time for me to come back and be able to say, okay, I could be a leader and use the leadership, development, the change management skills, all that skill set that I had, I got to kind of blend together, because what they were doing here was phenomenal, and their trajectory for growth it's just mind blowing. So Professional Arts started off, 26 years ago. They were one of the first compounding only pharmacies in the nation, definitely one of the first in Louisiana. But the founders were national, pharmacists of the year, compounding pharmacists of the year, kind of started out, was on the board that started out PCAB accreditation. So some really cool history. But whenever I started coming in, they started to diversify and really started saying, okay, we're really good at this, but, there's all these other parts of pharmacy. And they always tell the story about how many of their friends in compounding were no longer around because they weren't evolving fast enough. And so that, especially Eric, our CEO, he's innovative and is like always pushing us. And I think we second guess ourselves of like, oh my God, can we do that? Can we pull that off? And he's like, yeah, you can. And then, we end up figuring it out. But so really the business model has evolved quite a bit. We're still focusing on compounding, but it is now, 20% of our business, even though that part hasn't shrunk, but we've grown kind of the other parts of our business massively over the last 10 years.
So I hear a lot of things. One, you've really got, what's cool is your exposure. I mean, as much as in this podcast and folks, there's a lot of folks with that very similar story where it's like, hey, I've worked at Walgreens, I've worked at CVS, or I worked at name another chain in some way. And just like, hey, I wanted to go do something either a little broader or more what I wanted to do, or whatever everyone's reasons are, they're different typically. But what it does ground some folks into is just like some like, there's not a lot of places to get exposure for like leadership or training or just like really trying to get a staff on board, rowing all the direction, slotted into the right roles and all of that stuff for them. And I do feel like you learn those kind of bumps and bruises the hard way sometimes when you're just trying to like start your own business and you don't have that background. The nice thing about like some of those stories and journeys with some of the larger corporations just in general is those are kind of structured training processes, which is nice. And you get to like dive into those yourself or figure out in your position. It sounds like you got to even take it and make it better.
Right. I mean, that is, everybody has different, stories. It was, for me, it was an amazing experience. I think it's how you look at it, where, I was looking at the opportunity and saying, hey, I'm learning. They're teaching me, and I got to take those tools, and they, you're talking about processes built for 250,000 employees at the time. That's how big they were. Doesn't quite fit the same for 100, but those concepts, I was very blessed to be able to learn that, and then being able to apply it and say, well, how does it fit here? And everything you do, change management, and that was a huge focus for me, for the last few years when I was, working there. And, that's one of the things that Eric was like, I need help with change management here. And so, when I start out at, learning about change management, and that's so much, I on a day-to-day basis, I'm managing that, I think all of us are, but don't even realize it. I used to think, that change management was about convincing people to love the change.
Yeah.
And
right.
then,
okay.
And then I was,
not? Is it not?
No, and I didn't know, but there were people that, really people smarter than me that helped teach me. And I was, blessed by that. But it's not about loving the change, but you have to understand the why. And so it shifted my thinking of like, if I had to learn on my own, I was like, come on, this is going to be great. But not every change, not every change is something that you're going to end up loving it. But if you don't help your team to understand why the change is so important, that's your job as a leader, is really helping them understand that. And also level setting expectations about, I think initially going into it is like, oh, you're going to love this. You're going to love this new system we're converting to. It's going to be great. Everything to be, rosy. Well, then my approach now, because I've learned things, is, you know what? You can bleed this out if it's not, but it's like,
no, you get 10 cuss words.
Okay. It's not even a cuss word. It's just you know what? This change is going to suck.
Yeah.
Like,
it's going to suck.
Flat out. It is going to suck, but every day is going to be a little bit better than it was yesterday. And you have to keep thinking about those small wins and the small victories. And so, those are things that I've learned about what is the expectation. It's like, it's going to suck. Every day is going to get better, but this is what we're going to be able to do in the future. But it's going to be really hard to get there. It's going to be a challenge to get there. And we have to all be okay with that and understand it and support everybody through it, because we're going to be better off once we get through that change. And so just those are some things that I got to learn. I get to apply here, which is fun.
Yeah. Jonathan, I bet you can speak to so Jonathan's been one of the guys who's done like almost every job in Pioneer in some way, except maybe like actually code Pioneer. Like as far as going into a pharmacy and understanding like what it takes to like actually move from one system to another. And it seems like it's a lot of expectation setting going on. But Jonathan, I bet you can speak to tons of stories of folks going, I can't do this in the middle of it. And then going, oh, by the time you're leaving the pharmacy, it's like, oh yeah, no, I think we got this. I think we can see the light.
Yeah, completely. With that being said, Mark, it's a little bit every day, right? And I think what Lori talked about in the buy-in of your team, they're going to be the one in the trenches every day. They're going to be the first ones to come to you and say, look, we can do it this way. We're having success here, but I've noticed, maybe we're going to have success in another pivot, right? And go in a bit of a different direction. So it's really being transparent with them. I think they're going to be the ones operating that system, and they're also going to provide the quickest feedback to you on way to kind of pivot from that. That's really one of those things that I kind of take away from there. What I wanted to ask Lori was, you talked about your relationship with David and Eric and how you always felt at some point in time you guys would kind of come back together and there might be opportunities there. Can you talk to that process, how you came back into this situation with them, but also what did that journey look like as you were exploring, just kind of dabbling, I guess you could say, in the specialty model?
Yeah. So when Eric and I, for a while, we would just run into each other. But then there got to a point where once a year we would have lunch together. And, I had my job and I wasn't ready to leave. He was like, I really like what you do. I don't know where that would fit here. But when we, to talk a little bit about how we ended up focusing and doing, specialty and just even commercial product, because we were heavily focused on compounding. That's what we did. But it was, I love telling our story because it wasn't like, this is where we can make money, so let's go that direction. It was, we were doing compounding and we started recognizing that there were, especially for wound care, these patients, they were really, they were trying not to get, amputations was their next step. And so really complex situations, financially, really kind of high need population. And so we built out this clinical program where we were doing these advanced follow-ups and really talking with caregivers, followed up the patient as kind of assessments and reassessments before we really knew what specialty pharmacy and assessments and reassessments were. It just was the right thing to do for the patient and the providers. And whenever you start with that, then it's like that can only lead to good things, because you're doing the right thing for the patient. And so what ended up happening was we were doing that, and then these doctors wanted to also, there were commercially available products that they wanted to write and blend in. And at the time we weren't filling it. They would have salespeople go into their, locations and say, hey, we have these new products. And they were like, well, that's great, but I'm not sending it to all these, other pharmacies. if you can convince, professional arts pharmacy to start carrying commercially available products, then that would be ideal. So they kind of came knocking on our door saying, hey, we have these products. We have, patients need these products. And doctor after doctor we go to in the area keeps saying, well, try to convince professional arts pharmacy to carry it, because I know that they're going to take care of me. I know they're going to take care of our patients. And I know they're going to do, all the clinical services that are needed. And so that's really how the conversation started. And we were like, well, I mean, sure, we'll start carrying commercial available products, become, go down that route. And when that started happening, our growth started happening in an area that was kind of outside of the box. And so that's when Eric finally was like, you know what? I think that not only, operationally you can help, but like this is a big shift, big change in business. So I think, that's where I think your leadership development, your change management perspective, I think you could help us shift to where we kind of think differently, change our business model, change our strategy, while still holding on to what we're originally good at. So that's kind of how the journey kind of shifted, which is, to me, I think it's, at the end of the day, it was with the patient in mind is where it started. And I think that's, again, you can't go wrong whenever you're really thinking about what's the best thing clinically for a patient.
I think with pharmacy, to me, I've been around it a little bit now, but when it's about that, like when it starts the way you just talked about and going down, I'll call it another business line or a different niche or whatever it is in the pharmacy perspective, and they go chase, hey, maybe there's something here. It's usually the ones that, to me, that stick around, and the ones like kind of those channels that have super good staying power, seems like they always start the way you talk about, well, we're already doing this for the patients, and we just didn't it just started building. And it's just because we were like, and that's what it sounded like. Okay, cool. And then y'all you matured the business in that regard to like, okay, cool. This is a real segment of our business now. And it sounded like a big growth driver. You have a ton of experience in all of that kind of change management leadership stuff. And y'all have taken a team, I think, from the way I understand it, I'll just call it a handful of employees at one point to well over 110 now. I guess like you went from probably having almost no middle management to like now having to develop leaders, and you're not the only leader. Your two co-founders aren't the only leaders anymore in the org, which is good. I guess, can you speak through, I guess, a little bit of your thoughts for other folks that are kind of, I think we have a lot of folks that listen to this going, man, I'm about to have to like promote someone. I'm now like, I have to because they have to free up their own time to do whatever the business needs perspective. I guess, can you speak to like what it is to develop like a real, like, I don't know if it's a leadership training inside the pharmacy itself or culture building, whatever you call it. I guess
a little bit of all of it. Yeah. And it's hard because, you're used to a model where, you have so much more control. Jonathan was one of the team of how many of y'all, Jonathan, when we converted to Pioneer?
I think it was about 6 or 7.
We got, and for 2 weeks, we hired them to come in for 2 weeks. Because even then we probably were about 70 employees at that time. It's hard because when we were smaller, everybody is in a room and you're like, oh, I'm making a decision. Hey, y'all, we changing this.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. This is how you do it. And now we have rooms and rooms of people and different teams, and each team has different needs. So it's hard. The communication is harder. The number of people it takes to execute all of those things get harder. But, and it's really hard because when you're in control, then to start delegating, I think with middle management, I mean, that's always the hardest thing, is that you're used to you're the expert, you're the one doing it all, but then now you need to work through someone else. And that's not easy, but, we're also not big enough, to hire in, fancy people to do all these advanced, leadership development things, or, that's tough when you're smaller. But there's great tools. And I think learning to figure out how to trust and give a little bit at a time. I think we sometimes you underestimate the people that are in the building, because it's so much easier. We always talk about where it's like you have this, this golden applicant on the outside, and they just seem like they're going to offer so much because you don't know their pros and cons. Where it's like, I think trying hard to find somebody and develop them, over time. But you have to give them space and wings, and you have to allow them to try, and you have to allow them to make some mistakes. You have to try to be, measured in what type of mistakes, and make sure we talk about failing forward, but you really don't learn those hard lessons until you learn those hard lessons.
Unfortunately, I only exclusively learned the hard way. At time, my parents would agree with that, I think.
Yeah, it's tough, but failing forward is one of my favorite concepts, because it's, as long as you don't get paralyzed by that change. And look, I talk about this all the time too, not just like with the team, but whenever you're smaller, it's easy to look, and it's overwhelming to look at a bigger pharmacy or a leader. You're starting off as, individual contributor, and you look at these leaders and you just, that pharmacy or that leader, they have all the answers. They know it all. And I think that when I was younger, I used to, all the people I admired so much, I really felt that they had all the answers. But then you get to the point where you start getting older, and you start to realize, they didn't have all the answers. They just weren't afraid to move forward, even though, despite the fact that they didn't have the answers. So anytime we're growing, I feel like it's scary at first, because we're going to do something new and we have no idea what we're doing. And I feel like the hardest part of innovating, no matter if it's a system, a process, whatever it is not knowing where to start and who's the experts that you can go to that might have this information. And that's the biggest piece of it. But then you still just going forward, and like, we're going to figure it out. Somebody out there is going to be able to give us some answers, and just digging in. I consider myself a data expert now. I know more about coding. I would never code, but more about coding than I ever wished I did. All the different things where, like, with especially smaller pharmacies, you just have to be willing to be like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out, and I'll figure out who's the expert that's smarter than me that can help me figure it out.
Yeah. I would say, it's just kind of two things. It sounds like you're going in a direction of like, man, we need to get, as you've gotten scale, it seems like even more data capable. It sounds like that sounded like a need there. And then two, but like, I would like, if you can you like describe really like the patients and what you guys, like, who you serve? Because that's something that, in my opinion, about your pharmacy is like one of the most unique pharmacies I've ever even seen. I know you guys started out compounding first, but then you've like really ventured in, like, I don't know, ventured's not the right word, but like, as you have a focus on wound care and like the really specialized cases. But if you can like, just like give the audience a little bit of like, hey, this is the kind of pharmacy and kind of patients we serve.
Yeah, it is really unique. So, of course, the compounding, we have, regular, retail, commercially available things, but we've gotten to be really kind of national experts. First of all, we're licensed in 50 states, which is a blessing and a challenge all in itself to keep up with 50 states. But some of the areas that are really unique is, like I said, wound care, even ENT, sinus infection, where we work really closely with the doctors. And we've been doing this since, I think they started in about 2009. So this was before I came along, where, doctors were capable. They were doing culture, DNA, at the time, just culture services, but they knew what was covered from a, pathology perspective, but didn't quite know what would be covered from the insurance perspective, or what are, really all the options, or not even that, but just how might that be applied. Certain wounds, it's like taking something orally, or they may end up in the hospital on an IV antibiotic would be the only option. So how do we help doctors be creative about how to really get through a biofilm? And so we get doctors that'll send, culture, and now there's DNA tests. So you can actually do a DNA swab for infection in the sinuses or the wound. And the DNA will tell you all the pathogens that are in there. And I think it's been like toenail. We grow up learning that, it's toenail fungus. If you have, and then this is just a minor example, but when we were starting to do more advanced cultured DNA work with the doctors, we've been like, there's a viral infection in there. It's not just the traditional fungal,
I didn't even know. Yeah.
And I always joke that I'm like the last pharmacist. We have about 15 pharmacists, and I'm like the last one that you want to ask too many clinical questions. But I'm not the clinical expert, but you really start seeing some unique things. And then not only that, but as especially with wounds, as you start treating the primary pathogen, then the biofilm starts to evolve.
Okay.
And so then the, bacteria will start growing more, or a different type of virus, or, something else. And so you need to reculture. So that's where assessments and reassessments came along,
Right.
where after a certain amount of time, you work with the doctor and it's like, doctor, we're following up with this patient. It was getting better. Now it seems to not be. We would recommend, you maybe do another culture DNA scan, see what's going on. Is it evolving? Is it shifting to something else taking over? And so that's been just a huge part of our business, and really earned our credibility with the prescribers out there. And with ENT, same thing. They'll do scans, a lot of times during surgeries, and figure out kind of what types of pathogens are growing in the nasal cavity. So
it's super unique as far as like the type of care you guys are providing. And I imagine it's in an environment where it's super stressful for the patient, I imagine. Yeah.
I mean, this is their last chance before something major. You think about the diabetic, patient, there's, low circulation. I didn't know this until I started working here, that there are wound care patients that have had wounds for 15 years.
Oh,
I didn't even, understand that. I know it's possible that they were always treating and debriding, but we've had, doctors reach out and say, I've been treating this patient in wound care 15 years and it's closing for the first time ever because, we have such good partnership with y'all to figure out how to kind of evolve what we're doing to treat the wound. So super rewarding process for our pharmacists, and really you hear people talk about like pricing at the top of your license. So
it's got to feel great to like have someone, I guess, be done with therapies might be the right way to put it, or not be the right way to put it. I don't know, but to see like actual progress with something that has been a real challenge and could be really bad. For an extended period of time, and because they've got actually like a whole healthcare team working together now, and not just like a doctor they see and then they just kind of manage it on their own with like that. Just that's huge, and a gap. I don't think most patients know even exists to attempt to close that gap.
Right.
And so that's right. Super.
Yeah.
Credit to y'all. I'll just say that. Credit to y'all.
And that and even just adherence, you hear about, adherence, but, it's not just about refill calls. The right medications will do follow-up. We'll do even something like vitiligo, where that's a type of treatment, not the same, type of thing where you're worried about amputation, but it's a type of therapy where it's easy for a patient to stop applying medications that could treat it. And so really being purposeful about month 2, month 4, month 8, having a clinical, pharmacist call, the patient, how is it going? Are you still applying it? Because if you stop applying it, it's going to come back. And so really just kind of leaning into not just the initial, patient education about what needs to happen, but having the reminders, the follow-up calls, which we've, set up through care plans that, just drop in at the appropriate time, and just being able to kind of follow up and do that type of care.
I know I'm guilty of, I probably would be a terrible patient, just because even like if I'm on an antibiotic, the second I feel better, I usually am just like, I'm not taking it anymore.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know. And I know I have enough pharmacist friends now that I know I'm an idiot in that regard, but
I'm a pharmacist and I still do it. So I think it's just, so we know how important it is. But all of those things, I mean, Jonathan, when you came in with the team, it brings unique challenges. So it's amazing to do all these great innovative things, but that also means that systems aren't always designed to do what we're doing. And so Jonathan and team had to really help us. We had to get gritty and use our system in ways that, wasn't necessarily, designed, and get really creative. And then not only that, but talking about setting teams' expectations of like, okay, we're going to try this. I guarantee you we're going to have to change something about this. Y'all are going to give us feedback. And teams are really good about giving you feedback about what's not working. So I will say that they're very helpful in that sense, but they're the ones doing it every day. And so I know Jonathan and the team, we had to, okay, we're trying to accomplish this. Like, how might we make this happen? And it really is around, there's a design concept, and I'm trying to remember, it's just prototyping, where it's like you're like, you don't make big changes, you make a little change at a time and see, because if it breaks early in the process, then it's, it's safer than, okay, this is it, this is black and white, there's nothing changing, so kind of had to prototype our way in the system to get it where we need it to be. So it was interesting.
I'd say we definitely stress tested parts of the system that include categories, triggers, and care plans and all those things, for sure. Lori, one thing I wanted to ask, as we kind of unpack some of this and we talk about, your team scaling, getting to a certain point where you've seen success, especially in some of these specialty areas of focus of treatment and all. What do you feel like, I think it's so different from you, or from your team and how you probably hire your pharmacists and your technicians. You talked about that golden applicant sitting on the sidelines, and do you promote from within? What do you think are some of the bigger qualities that you look for in your team as you look to, continue to have, those active employees, but also as you grow? What are the things that really matter most that you're looking at for hiring?
I think trying to be as honest as possible whenever we're hiring, and setting the expectations early on of like, I know that it might be, hey, and I've worked in Pioneer before. It's like, oh, that's great. We're going to be using Pioneer.
Be like us, right?
Yes. Like, I promise you, I haven't seen Pioneer used like
right.
this.
You haven't seen this version of it. Right.
Yes. Which is great. But or that in pharmacy, wherever you were, you probably were the star tech, and you can get that way here, but we just want to make sure that you're not going to feel that way. It's the first 6 months are going to be hard because this is so different than what you've ever experienced. But you have to enjoy the small victories and don't get discouraged. And so trying to, understand and try to find people that are okay with change and okay with that, growth mindset of like, you'll learn, you'll get through it. We are lucky, even though we're national, we still only have, our base in Acadiana, in South Louisiana. So, word of mouth and really, trying to find people that they've had experience working with, someone and bringing them in. So we have we have recruiting bonuses that, we give employees to help bring in people that they know and trust and that they would want to work with. That's always our most successful, employees, trying to do everything we can to find, for us, again, it's so unique. It takes so long to train someone. So you really have to invest in your existing employees, really invest in them because, starting from scratch. And it's been hard because normally we had such a low turnover rate but when you're growing, it doesn't matter how that is, you have to keep adding new people. And it really was a strain because your best employees are trying to do the work and train others at the same time. And that's tough. That's a challenge. But, so we make a point. Eric and David are the most generous. I mean, they are so kind and really good. We have food trucks at least once a month, ice cream or snow cones, or I know that's just small things, but whatever small things we could do to make things more enjoyable, because it's hard work and it's a lot of work and we're busy. So that we call it building better together is kind of our motto when it comes to like a employee value proposition of like, you give us your time, your effort, your dedication. In return, you're going to get, nice pay. You're going to get benefits, but also you're going to get perks. And Eric invited the entire pharmacy. We had, 100 something people at his farm, playing with the chickens, fishing in his ponds. Usually my daughter's ponies get to go, so the kids get to have pony rides. Didn't happen this year, but you really have to take care of your employees, and the good ones will stay. We have a pharmacist that we just made a huge celebration for her. She had her 50 year as a pharmacist and has been with us for probably 35, 40 of those years. I say with us, with Eric and David, because I did work before they started this pharmacy. So.
Yeah, I imagine. So this would be interesting. This is a question for you because I'm gonna be really like, I don't know if vulnerable is the right word here, but like I have I think everyone's this way. I just want to confirm it when I ask somebody who's had to hire a lot of folks as well, i.e. Lori here. My networking rate when I hire someone who like someone's known and they're referred or whatever, great. Like those work out so well typically. Like for the most part, it's 80 or 90% of the time the hit rate is great. And externally, I'm still like sometimes where no one knows the candidate at all, and like that just happens to be the best place. Like, it's just tougher. It's just tougher, and there's a lot of like either the expectations maybe weren't set right for what the role really was, or whatever, or because like when you get a referral, they kind of set the tone for you.
Right.
They're like, hey, this is the job first, and all of that stuff. And I do think that's why setting expectations is. I've had some hard lessons learned myself of like, man, I really just didn't think. Some of it was like, I just don't think I prepared them well enough sometimes coming in.
I've read once long ago that sometimes, whenever you have, a disgruntled employee or not perform or whatever the issue is, that it's really just, it's a role mismatch, like they're good at, something. But look, we've, I'd have to say, honestly, I'll be like, we haven't really cracked the code on it either. Like, when we're hiring somebody we don't know, yeah, sometimes it works out. And look, I was given all the tools, how to do behavioral interviewing, Chatley and all these great assessments and like, honestly, it's still just your best guess.
Yeah, it really still is. Yeah.
And sometimes I think for us, usually within the first 90 days, they're either out the door without like, whoo, I don't know what I got into, or it just seems like, I think for us, if they're not going to make it, usually don't make it. It's pretty quick in the process, which it's still the cost, but at least make that happen kind of earlier of saying, will this work out or not? Because you don't want to, invest a year or two and then, it'd be a wasted year. But hiring is probably one of the most stressful things for our management team and for all of us of like, how are you making the right hire? And when you're growing this fast and need that many hires, it's tough.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was just thinking about it too myself. I was just like, man, it sounds like to me, I always tell people, man, just try to network. I know that sounds like such a business jargony crap thing to say sometimes, but like really, if you can figure out and encourage folks to do that, like if you can, like your referral program sounds like that's a really great way to get kind of frontline to midline.
Yeah. And we've broken it up to where it's you get, you get so much after, at the hire, you get so much after 90 days, and then you get the additional amount. I think it's 6 months, so it's like, okay, not only, but they have to be the right fit and they have to make it,
yeah, absolutely.
So that's been huge for us, but.
No, that's good. I guess I'll segue into like something a little more, I don't know if this is like, I'm going to ask for advice from you. Like, so what would you tell like a pharmacist that's scaling a team to, and I know everyone's situation is different, but like, do you have any rules of thumbs or principles you like to employ when you're dealing with two things? I would say change in the pharmacy, because a lot of the folks that I know that are super successful have changed a bunch. Mm-hmm. Like they tend to change constant. And I think working there requires, you gotta be okay with change to a degree, but then too, like picking the right leaders in that regard.
Yeah, I think for, coming up with a change strategy, I think it's easy to get lost in too many details. So I think, all the, really when you think about the trajectory and all the things that from hiring, but you need a hire, but also do you have the right workflow, or the workflow you're using, is it the most efficient that you're using? So you need to look at that. And then, are you bringing in new programs whenever you're still training people? There's so many different things. So I think forcing your leadership team to sit back every few months and say, okay, but like, what are the priorities? How do we refocus and make sure that we're really doing a few things well? Because it can get overwhelming. You could start to like want to chase everything. So I think that, trying to remember that and trying to prioritize and say, what are the 3 priorities for this year? And sometimes whenever you're going through exercises like that, it just feels like you're like going through exercise just for the sake of it. But it needs to be useful, and it needs to be, like I have sticky, my life is run by sticky notes. And so I have sticky note with my 3 priorities.
Jonathan, you didn't teach them about that in Pioneer? What are you doing?
Yeah. So for us, for this year, my priorities are, digital and technology transformation, especially around data, and digital services for our patients, expanding, our clinical services that we're offering, and then workflow efficiency, and part of it is technology, but what technology we might want to include, just because we set up this great authorization care plan for the, each product is customized, that worked great. Is that still the best one? So kind of those are, always kind of focus. And those are the 3 areas that I, need to stay prioritized for this year. So I think making sure you're grounding and, there's a lot of distractions that can happen. So how do you stay focused on the things, and is what that distraction, sometimes they're necessary distractions, but is that really contributing to, your goals, or is that just, spreading you too thin? And
Makes
then
sense.
my advice that I love to give everyone, especially, this applied a little bit more in corporate setting whenever you're used to working in a store, then you go work in a corporate setting. But I think for all of us, usually I would take a sticky note and I'd write, learn to love the gray space, and I'd put it on people's computers, because that concept by itself is like, as a leader, you have to learn. Nobody is coming to you with the answers. I mean, you have to really end up being kind of passionate about saying, this is great, and I'm not given the roadmap, especially if you want to be creative and innovative, like, Eric and David have done here. They're not following a roadmap that anybody else did. And so
super unique. Yeah.
We've had to learn to love the gray space. And that's, I think these days, that's just, no matter what industry you're in, you have to understand that. And so I think that's where you start to, even with your team, that's where you start to see who might your leaders be versus who are they could be outstanding, but they're your doers. It's like, who are the ones that are like, I have a young pharmacist here that, he hasn't been out of school long, but he is just, his curiosity is leaves in bounds, where he's like, I'll help you with that. What is it? He's jumping in going, I'll do it. And then another what a phenomenal pharmacist. And it's just like, this is the process, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it well. And you need both in your business.
Oh my gosh, we need an equal amount of all of those folks.
But those ones that like that gray space are the ones that, when Amy is another executive on our team, and she's, my work best friend, we collaborate on everything together. And, she laughs that she got her IT degree in Google. And just those of us that are like
my law degree as well.
Yeah. Law degree. Yeah. And we're definitely not going to pretend like we're the expert on all those things, but we're not scared to just say, well, I don't know how to do it, but somebody has to figure it out. And so let's teach ourselves, because sometimes it's like we need to find an expert, but we don't even know enough to ask the expert the right questions. So we have to kind of teach ourselves enough to be able to start that conversation.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. That's great. I guess before we get rolling here, to Jonathan, I was going to make you tell us. I'm going to ask for advice from you, because you've got so much good experience training a bunch of people all at once in a fairly high pressure environment. Where are you seeing, like, where pharmacies or cysts or techs or whoever being successful in adopting something new? Where do you, as far as like either culture, attitude, perspective, or approach, whatever it is, where do you see like the pharmacies that have the easiest time doing it? And I'll be really frank, it's never easy. So
yeah, I think you're right. I unpack a lot of what Lori said today, and I think it's really interesting. This all kind of ties in well. Just to share with you, I'm building some slides. I'll be presenting at our conference this year, Connect and Grapevine. So I'm excited for that. But I kind of think through the lens of a couple of things here. um, identifying just things that can save you time. I think one of the things that as a pharmacy team, we get focused in just the work, right? The day to day, the grind and all those things. And what I've started to realize and what I've started to share with potential clients that come into our process is what can we do to make you more efficient to get you out from behind the counter? I think that's kind of been my mantra.
It's a good North Star goal too, right? Everyone can resonate with. Yeah.
And I say that in a community aspect, Mark, and I'm sure Lori can say this too, is that if you can get from behind the counter, we can make some of your processes internally a little bit more efficient and get you out in front and talking to your customers, then you can identify those problems where you can help the community. So it's more of that, like doing the little things that you can do, tweaking those processes, shaving some time off your day. So where you can go and spend 20 or 30 minutes, broken up over a number of patients and identify maybe some of those needs that your community has. So that's been one of the things. Part of my slides as I was building those too was kind of a saying from Albert Einstein that kind of just caught my eye. So I have it in there. It was, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking that created them, and just
that's a good point.
Continue to drive just innovation. So those are some of them.
Those are huge. That's huge. Well, shoot. Well, Lori, you let us eat up a lot of your time. I appreciate it. And I know you've got a great team there, probably ready for you to come out and be like, hey, help us with it. I'm kidding. From that perspective, but I don't want to let either of you go until like we hit the couple things. One, I want to ask you specifically, Lori. I always try to like ask this to everyone. Like, as far as like, do you have someone who was really like influential taking you through kind of your pharmacy career? It's you gave a lot of folks credit in general. Like, I just didn't know if you wanted to.
Yeah. So I think easy, going way back to my days of when I first became a divisional pharmacy leader with Albertsons Savon. Jerry Bay was our executive director of pharmacy in Chicago. And to this day, there are so many things that I've learned from him. So I was also managing Louisiana when Albertsons and pharmacies when Hurricane Katrina hit, and 2 weeks later, Hurricane Rita. And Jerry Bay always still says, that's the best MBA program you ever, have experienced, was the real life going through that. But, there were simple things like that he taught me, like I was really struggling with another leader within the organization, and I was kind of expressing all, my concerns, to Jerry about it. And he would listen and he'd say, Lori, he's like, I could help, talk to the right people about maybe that person not being there, but like there will be a replacement of that person. Someone else. Like there will always be that person. So like, let's figure out how you could succeed despite working with somebody that's frustrating, maybe isn't listening, doing all those things. So little things like, and I just remember being young and being a big shift of like, you're right. I mean, I tell my daughter that all the time of like, there will be some other jerk that's going to come along, but you still need to be successful. And so he's probably one of the big ones. And so many. Freddie Mills is one of the pharmacists that whenever my chemistry teacher was a pharmacist and he was a pharmacist, he became a state representative and state senator, and spoke to him like he still helps guide me in my career. So those are two big ones that made huge impacts on me in my life.
Oh, that's huge. Jonathan works for the jerk every day. So he gets it, is what I'll say. Say his name's Mark. Anyway, and then I guess last before we go, for both of you, Jonathan, I'll make you go first. Prescribables. What are you reading, watching, or listening to that maybe other folks here might enjoy?
Yeah, I kind of have a wide range of podcasts. Sometimes whenever I want to kind of escape at the end of the day, I do a number of Wondery podcasts. So a couple of them are crimes. If you've heard of one of these from Wondery, it's Dr. Death, who is a physician in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Really? Is that the guy?
There was a mini series on it, I believe, on NBC. But it's been great, and that's kind of sometimes my escape. But not reading anything currently. I just finished up a sales course with Northwestern Kellogg, so taking a break for a second. But always a podcast listen for sure.
For sure, Lori.
Yeah. So I'd say two things. Currently, I have a 15-year-old daughter who loves to read too. And she's gotten me really into Stephen King, which I never thought I'd be into Stephen King, novels, but reading the fairy tale right now, Stephen King, but The Institute, some of the other Stephen King books. But when I'm not reading fiction, because of my experience with leadership development, change management, I really started to recognize and that so many of our tendencies and habits that I was seeing whenever I was running leadership development programs, some of their habits and things, like I started to recognize that probably started in their childhood. And again, I'm not the expert in it, but I became really fascinated, especially once I had a child, of like, what are skills and habits that I see in leaders now that are good or not so good, that probably started their development really early on in life. So, childhood development, brain development is kind of my other thing that I'm just obsessed with learning about it, and really involved in our local school system on a gifted advisory panel and things like that. So anything having to do with how the brain develops. And then, imagine if we start teaching children earlier skills such as leadership development, or even in high school, them having those skills by the time they get into the workforce is just kind of a really exciting thing for me. So
that's cool. It's also interesting. Like, I just think about this. Like, I was trying to, like, with my kids, like, just want y'all to be productive members of society to a degree, but also like just be like, it helps in relationships. It helps in all of that stuff. Like I'm equally fascinated in what that kind of, I guess, knowledge pursuit. I've got something that's super not like even remotely work related, and I think I mentioned this before, but like I'm one of the few people who haven't watched White Lotus yet, so I've been watching that. It's if y'all don't know it, I'm not going to ruin it for anybody, but just imagine a show about some of the most obnoxious people on the planet, but also funny. I don't know how to really describe it. It's a one of one as far as a show I've ever watched. But that's what I'm watching right now. But I did listen to, I don't know if either of you listen to the Acquired podcast at all. They did a 3.5 hour like deep dive into the epic EHR, like that, like how it started, how she started. Apparently she was, I think her name's Judy. I can't remember her name. Sorry. But like basically a genius level Bill Gates type programmer who just happened to not build like the most broadest thing, but build a really deep vertical thing with Epic in itself. So it's a really, really interesting. They even worked with Epic to get more information on it. So it was a really cool podcast. I'll say that.
Interesting. I've not heard of that one, but White Lotus, I've seen the first season. I'm really not good at like following through. No matter how good something is, if like you get more than one season, you lost me. I'm on to the next thing. So
absolutely terrible. I can never have conversations with my friends about Yellowstone or anything that's more popular. Rain Man was another one I started, but again, not really good on the completion rate.
Yeah,
it's tough for me too. Like the nice thing about it is it's only 6 episodes, so I was like, okay, I can do that.
I can handle that.
If you've got 20 in front of me for one season, oh man, I don't know if I'll ever get through it.